The lights in the national security hearing room weren't dim, but the silence made them feel that way. A decorated witness came to remind America of his service. What he didn't expect was that the quietest man in the room had brought more than his resume. This isn't a movie scene. It's what happens when a symbol of strength meets a system built on excuses. And when Arnold finally spoke, just 12 words were enough to end the act. If you've ever been told you don't belong at the table, stay right here. Because this wasn't a debate. It was a reckoning. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from today, and if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. The room was quiet, but not serene. It was the kind of quiet that comes after the final camera check, when everyone remembers they're being watched. 2 American flags stood at opposing corners of the hearing chamber, casting long vertical shadows on the paneled oak. A nameplate read, "Oversight Hearing on Domestic Intelligence Classification Practices." It was glossy, recently polished. Like the witness, Kash Patel adjusted his red tie. He didn't rush. The room would wait. "Mr. Chairman," he began, his tone sliding across the surface like oil. "If I may respond to the previous question from the former governor." The chairman nodded, eyes down. Patel turned, not toward the dais, but toward the man seated at the far right of the panel. A nameplate read, "Mr. Arnold Schwarzenegger." But the name wasn't the target. The legacy was. Patel tilted his head, microphone catching the cadence perfectly. "With respect, Governor, people who play soldiers on screen shouldn't question those who've actually led missions." There was no gasp. That would have been too honest. Instead, a ripple, a controlled exhale of superiority, moved across the Republican seats like wind skimming a polished table. Someone chuckled under their breath. A young congressman smirked without looking up. A lobbyist in the back row whispered something sharp behind his palm. The air did not move. But the temperature changed. The camera didn't cut to Arnold's face. It hovered instead on his hand, resting on the table, fingers curled inward so tightly the skin had blanched white at the knuckles. He didn't flinch. One of the older press photographers near the back chamber leaned forward and muttered, not loud but not soft either, "He's not laughing." Aides looked up. Just slightly. Enough. Kash Patel continued, emboldened by silence.
"I've briefed presidents.
I've coordinated real-time threat responses. Not scripted drama, real national threats. I don't mean to diminish anyone's public service, but there's a difference between leading on a set and leading when American lives are at risk." It wasn't a yell. It was a sharpening. He smiled slightly, as if this had been inevitable. The narrative was setting in, word by word. This man is a guest here. He doesn't belong in this room. Arnold didn't shift, didn't blink, didn't reach for the mic. But the camera noticed. The tip of his thumb pressed, slowly but deliberately, against the edge of a photo tucked half out from his notes. A black and white image, folded once, corners softened. Just enough movement to mark a pulse. The chairman coughed once and looked at the clock. It was only 15 minutes into the session. Patel folded his hands neatly. "I believe we owe the American public clarity, not commentary. I'm here to answer questions about security protocol, not to entertain insinuations from those new to the field." He didn't name Arnold. He didn't need to. The phrase "new to the field" lingered, like smoke that doesn't rise. One of the interns sitting along the wall, headphones in, glanced up and made eye contact with no one. But she mouthed the word, "Oof." On screen, the network caption read, "Kash Patel responds to Schwarzenegger's line of questioning. There hadn't been a question. Only a presence." And now, that presence was being reshaped. Arnold's nameplate caught a bit of sidelight, casting its own shadow onto the table. Behind it, the man didn't stir. He wasn't being quiet because he was defeated. He was being quiet because that was the next move. Silence, when held long enough, makes the last word look insecure. Across the room, an older woman, former intelligence analyst, retired, watched the exchange from the gallery. Her lips pressed into a line, unreadable. She turned slightly toward the man beside her and said just loud enough for a C-SPAN mic to catch, "That wasn't tactical. That was theater." The chairman, perhaps sensing the energy pivot, tapped his gavel once. No one was out of order. But the room was shifting. Patel leaned back, adjusting his mic slightly to suggest he was done. He folded his notes, then refolded them. His eyes darted to the left, looking for approval. Arnold finally moved. Not much. He reached forward, not for the microphone, but for the glass of water. Not to drink. He simply rotated it. A full 180. The logo now faced away. The camera caught it. Paused on it. In the control room, a tech clipped that 3-second shot and labeled it. Arnold _reacting as _rotated. Nothing had been said. But what had just landed was louder than applause. The message wasn't retaliation. It wasn't defense. It was control. Across the room, a congressional staffer scribbled a single line into his notes. The actor hasn't spoken, but the performance just started. The silence stretched a few seconds longer, long enough to signal something had reversed. And for the first time that morning, Kash Patel adjusted his tie. But not to speak. To hide the tightening under his collar. The room hadn't breathed in nearly 30 seconds. Not really. Not fully. There were throat clears, paper shifts, a pen cap clicking twice near the rightmost aisle. But no one truly breathed. Arnold leaned forward. Not dramatically, just far enough for the microphone to pick up the movement of fabric. The sound technician adjusted the fader slightly. Everyone wanted clarity now. He reached into the folder. Not for notes. Not for law. A thin black and white photograph slid into view, creased, faded at the edges, clipped at the corner like it had once been tucked in the lining of a wallet. He didn't introduce it. He didn't hold it up. He placed it face up on the table. Deliberately. In the image, 5 men in uniform, early 1970s. Standing outside a chain-link gate under a crooked sign marked Foot Dicks. Their postures were loose, unscripted. Not for ceremony. For memory. The room watched the photo more than the man. Arnold adjusted the mic. Just once. Then, Mr. Patel. On Fox News, September 12th, you stated you personally oversaw the declassification process. That's your voice, on record. Pause, but under oath, here, he tapped once on the deposition page in front of him. You stated, quote, I had no direct knowledge of any declassification procedures being followed. So which is it? He didn't change tone. There was no rise. No push. The gravity came from restraint. Patel blinked twice. Once to center himself. Once to respond. Context matters. Governor. I was referring to different stages of the same process. Media and testimony have different parameters. Arnold didn't respond. He merely angled the paper slightly toward the camera. I had no direct knowledge. That's not ambiguous. That's not a parameter. That's a fact claim. Patel shifted in his chair. Not enough to be noticed in court. But in a televised chamber, everything counts. Someone in the gallery, retired Navy, silver hair, tie loose at the neck, sat up straighter. His fingers moved slowly to his collar and buttoned the top clasp. Not for fashion. For form. Arnold didn't acknowledge it. He turned the page again. Quietly. Each flip was timed. You also certified, here, on June 3 Road, he placed a second page beside the first, lined them like evidence in a frame, that all classified materials had been returned. We now know, he didn't say from the press, he didn't need to. Dozens more were discovered weeks later. He didn't ask a question. He didn't have to. Silence, in this format, is a mirror. And the room began to reflect. Patel adjusted his mic. It clicked. Unnecessary. But involuntary. Again, Governor, these are complex procedural issues. You're condensing timelines and oversimplifying distinctions. Arnold looked at him. Not harshly, but wholly. Like someone inspecting whether a machine still functions. I'm quoting your sworn statements. Nothing here has been reworded. Patel inhaled. This feels like a legal trap. A few seats down, a junior congressman whispered to an aide, it's not a trap if you built the hole yourself. The aide didn't smile. Arnold didn't lean in. He just moved a single finger, tapped the table once beside the photograph. Not loudly. Enough. You say you protected this country. So did they. He didn't gesture to the photo. He didn't need to. It was already in frame. Patel glanced down, instinctively. The camera caught it. A flicker. Then recovery. With all due respect, I've served in war zones. I've made calls no actor would understand. This isn't about sentimentality. This is national security. Arnold nodded. Not in agreement. In confirmation. He closed the folder gently. Then he asked the question again. Both statements cannot be true. Which one is false? This time, he didn't give room for a speech. The question wasn't a prompt. It was a wall. And now the room understood. The man they thought was here to make a statement wasn't making one. He was pressing one. Patel looked toward the chairman. No help came. He cleared his throat. Water was just out of reach. In the far left row, a C-SPAN producer made a motion to the camera operator. Stay wide. Don't cut yet. The flags in the back corners didn't move. But they seemed less symmetrical now. Arnold placed the pen down. Parallel to the photo.
No explanation.
No defense. Just alignment. That was the reversal. The room had expected a reply from a public figure, a counter from an image. What they received was a stillness that made the myth break. He hadn't defended his credibility. He had dismantled theirs. And said nothing else. The pause had lasted long enough for the air to feel brittle. Kash Patel adjusted the mic again. It didn't need adjusting. His tie was centered. His jacket pressed. His posture correct. But the balance had shifted. And he felt it. He tried to smile. But the smile landed too fast. Like he'd rehearsed it, not remembered it. Governor, he let the word linger, almost playful. You're presenting this like you've been in the field. A beat. The tone sharpened. You haven't. No reaction. Patel leaned forward, just enough to suggest familiarity. But not respect. You've been on set. You've worn uniforms for camera angles. You sold movie tickets. He said it with a half laugh. Not full ridicule, just enough for plausible deniability. It was the kind of line designed for clickbait headlines, followed by, watch the room react. But the room didn't. Not the way he expected. The camera, anticipating a verbal counter from Arnold, didn't find one. So it panned. And landed instead on a man sitting 3 rows back, older, stone-faced, dark navy tie with a faded service pin near the collar. A former sergeant. Vietnam era. He didn't flinch. Didn't sigh. He simply shook his head. Once. Not the time for that. The words weren't spoken aloud. They didn't need to be. A boom mic caught them anyway. Low, gritty, worn in like old boots. In the gallery, a journalist scribbled witness misstep in the margin of their notes. Arnold didn't move. His hands remained folded. Elbows tucked. Chin leveled. He didn't correct. Didn't defend. But the stillness had changed. The silence now carried weight, not passivity, but presence. Patel looked around. Quick, but not panicked. Just measuring. He continued. I know the public likes a strong jawline and a one-liner. But governing is different. Oversight is different. This isn't a film set where you call cut when things get complicated. Still nothing. So Patel filled the space again. Some of us stayed in Washington during the hard years. Some of us didn't go off to studio lots and makeup trailers. There was a pause after that, half-second too long. Enough for a few in the back row to begin shifting in their chairs. The line had tilted from performance to insult. And the room knew it. C-SPAN's second camera cut from a side shot of Patel to a wide, capturing both men in frame. Arnold still hadn't spoken since the last question. But the distance between them now felt narrower. Not physical. Moral. In the control room, the producer flagged the segment for live pivot moment tagging. Arnold blinked. Slowly. That was all. Patel cleared his throat. Look, if this were about TV optics, you'd win. But this is about procedures, not posters. He looked toward the Republican side for reinforcement. There were no nods this time. One member scrolled his phone. Another wrote something down but didn't look up. From somewhere near the press box, a camera shutter clicked. Just once. The sound, oddly analog in a digital room, cut through the stale air. Arnold's eyes didn't narrow. They didn't change shape. But the camera zoomed. Slowly. As if following something unspoken. What it captured wasn't fury. It was alignment. Not with emotion. With precision. Patel shifted in his chair. The second time now. Governor, I'm not saying you haven't served in your way. I'm saying, when it comes to classified operations, you don't get to improvise your way through accountability. He tried to chuckle at the end. Lighten the tone. No one laughed with him. The chairman looked toward the left, checked a silent timer on the desk. Too early to intervene. Too late to clean it up. Arnold finally moved his hand. Just one. He adjusted the pen in front of him, not to write, but to rotate it. Slowly. The clip pointed toward Patel. The gesture meant nothing. Which is why it meant everything. He was still silent. Still unprovoked. But the pen now faced forward. As if it too had drawn a line. And this time, the silence wasn't neutral. It was humiliating. In the gallery, a young woman, recent law school grad, working as a clerk, typed a single sentence into her draft memo. Witness attempted dominance through discrediting. Result, neutralized by absence. The sentence would later appear in a legal analysis column titled, When Not Responding Wins the Room. Patel exhaled, an audible, too loud breath through his nose. He picked up his water, but didn't drink. He placed it back down and finally leaned away from the mic. Not to give space. To regroup. Arnold remained as he was. The pen remained as it was. The camera remained locked. And the myth, that Kash Patel controlled the room, just quietly fractured. The microphone didn't crackle. It held a steady breath, waiting. Arnold's voice came through with no preamble. Mr. Patel, in your training, were you ever taught that it was appropriate to store classified material in a guest bathroom? A few heads turned. Not in shock. In attention. The question wasn't theatrical. It was clinical. Too precise to be rhetorical. Too bare to be misread. Kash Patel let the silence hang, not as strategy, but as calculation. The pause was just long enough to register discomfort, not reflection. Then he leaned forward, smoothing his tie again, third time. That's a media nah, save it. Arnold didn't raise his voice. Yes or no? The room froze. Patel's mouth had stopped mid-word. The dash still hung in the air like a dropped syllable waiting to land. The interruption wasn't loud. It was timed. It didn't challenge his answer. It erased the attempt to reframe it. In the control booth, a C-SPAN assistant marked the clip. Arnold _cuts Patel mid-narrative after the camera cut to a front angle. Not on Patel's face. Not yet. It locked on the table. On the water glass. Which Patel had just grazed, accidentally, with his wrist when leaning in. It wasn't dramatic. But the push was enough. The water inside shifted. A delicate swirl, slow, almost rhythmic. Then stilled. But not before the light above caught the motion, reflected across the glass into Patel's nameplate. The ripple showed on the metal like a lie vibrating under scrutiny. He didn't answer the question. Instead, he tried to reclaim what had been taken. There are nuances here, Governor. Arnold didn't look away. But he didn't interrupt again. He didn't need to. The silence was now arranged. Patel fumbled for another sentence. He reached for the glass, but stopped halfway. Hand hovering, undecided. He pulled back. A congressional aide sitting 3 seats down from the chairman wrote 2 words on his legal pad. Momentum gone. Arnold kept his eyes forward. Let's go simpler then. No raise in tone. Just wait. In your sworn deposition, you certified that all classified materials had been returned. Yet documents were later recovered, undisclosed and unsecured. Patel shifted. Arnold continued. Did you verify the certification before signing? Patel drew breath through his nose. I relied on the understanding of staff who were, yes or no. It wasn't a demand. It was a reframe. A denial of wiggle room. This time, the pause stretched. 1 second. 2. The silence began to feel like a second voice. In the audience, someone coughed. Not dramatically, just human. But it marked the beat like punctuation. Patel's eyes flicked toward the Republican members. Still no rescue. Still no movement. We're not here to judge intent, Arnold said, calmly. We're here to understand action. The line between negligence and misconduct is often crossed by those too confident in procedure and too careless with truth. No one shifted. The hearing had become something quieter than confrontation, something colder. A dismantling. And for the first time, the hearing room felt asymmetrical. Arnold didn't have more words. He didn't need them. He looked down at the glass in front of him. Untouched. Full. Still. Then he looked back at Patel, slowly. The kind of look that doesn't question credibility. It registers its absence. Patel looked away. The chairman blinked at the sudden vacancy of sound. Then tried to speak, but before he could, a whisper broke the hush from the staffer bench. He just reset the room. It wasn't meant to be heard. But it was. Patel shifted again. Elbow now off the table. Shoulders slightly forward, as if bracing. Not for attack. For exposure. Arnold placed the pen down again. Not vertically. Horizontally. Across the folder like a bridge. A final gesture. And with that, the chapter closed. There was no applause. But the water in Patel's glass hadn't settled. Not yet. The folder was already open. Arnold didn't slide it forward. He didn't offer it as challenge or demand. He simply tapped the top page with the back of his pen. Twice. Not loudly. Not slowly. Enough. This document bears your signature, Mr. Patel. Certifying, in your own words, that all classified material had been returned and logged. Is that correct? The sentence did not echo. It landed. Quiet. Dense. Like a soft impact on a sealed room. Patel blinked. He reached for the document but stopped short. Instead, his hand moved to straighten his cuff. There was no cuff link. These hearings, he began, voice just slightly higher in register, have been, consistently, weaponized to advance political narratives. He paused. Waited for affirmation. None came. He adjusted the MIC again. It didn't need adjusting. Arnold did not move. The folder remained between them, open to the page where the signature sat, pristine and sharp beneath the letterhead. Patel's hand hovered over it now. Just long enough for the lens to notice. A camera on the left zoomed in. The angle caught it clean, his palm, flattened just above the paper. Motionless. Then, a drop of sweat traced the line of his temple. Down the cheek. Hung for half a breath. And fell. Directly onto the page. On the signature. Right where the pen had touched. The ink didn't blur like in movies. But it wavered. A minor tide. Just enough to smear the last letter of his name into something less certain. Arnold said nothing. In the gallery, someone shifted in their chair. Not to move. To mark. A journalist lifted their phone, not to record, but to frame. A congressional photographer 2 rows back clicked once.
No flash.
The image captured the wet mark across the document before it could be wiped. Patel picked up a pen. Slowly. Held it. Then paused. His grip weakened slightly. Just enough that the camera's depth of field caught the subtle tremble between thumb and forefinger. He looked down. The line was blank. It was a formality, he wasn't being asked to sign now. But the placement of the pen, the exposure of the paper, and the weight of unspoken consequence turned it into something else. He placed the pen down. Not capped. Not returned to his folder. Just placed. Horizontal. Misaligned. Rolling slightly before stopping. The chairman cleared his throat but didn't interrupt. Arnold spoke again. Measured. No lift. No fall. You were asked earlier whether you personally verified all items listed before signing. Did you? No answer. Only a shift in Patel's jaw, an imperceptible tightening. Arnold waited. A full second longer than necessary. Do you verify before you certify, Mr. Patel? Still nothing. A staffer near the back wrote down, long silence. Noted. C-SPAN's live ticker added a caption in real time. Patel declines to directly confirm signature process, and then, Patel reached for the document. His hand touched the damp edge. He froze. Faintly, the tip of his finger caught the blurred ink. A grey smudge. A fingerprint not meant to be left. He pulled back. Closed the folder. But not fully. Arnold's gaze didn't follow the paper. It stayed fixed, on the hand that had hesitated. That was the reversal. Not the words. The tremor. On social media, the clip would later be titled, "The Pen He Didn't Lift," and millions would watch the single bead of sweat fall in silence. On replay. In slow motion. The moment the myth blinked. No one asked a question. No one objected. The hearing room wasn't loud. It wasn't even quiet. It was holding its breath. Arnold didn't shift in his seat. He waited until every page stopped rustling. Until the last click of a pen echoed into its own absence. Only then, with no cue from the chair, no procedural segue, did he speak. Mr. Patel, I may not have carried a nuclear football. A flicker from the camera. A tight frame. But Arnold wasn't looking into it. But I've carried orders. I've carried caskets. A chair creaked in the far back. It stopped. And I've carried truth longer than you've carried that smirk. No reaction. Not from Patel. Not from the gallery. Not from the subcommittee. Only a shift in air, barely perceptible. Like a room being repressurized. Arnold didn't follow it with rhetoric. He waited. Then, quieter, this isn't patriotism. This is evasion. No rising tone.
No declarative crescendo.
Just 5 words. And something in the posture of the room changed. A cameraman, stationed near the gallery rail, slowly tilted upward, without instruction. The frame rose, past Arnold, past Patel, past the committee. To the back wall. There, above the double doors, hung a framed flag. Not freshly pressed. Not under glass. The stars slightly faded. The corners curled. And dust, fine, undisturbed, lined the upper edge of the frame. The lens lingered. Just below it, a copy of the Constitution rested on a display shelf. But it wasn't open. It wasn't standing. It was flipped. Spine up. As if it had been handled, misplaced, forgotten mid-reference. No one reached for it. Arnold hadn't looked back. But his words had made the camera look. Patel was no longer touching anything. His fingers had retreated beneath the desk. Folded, not clenched. Still visible under the overhead lights, but less present. As if retreating without movement. The chairman leaned toward the MIC, but didn't speak. Something about the moment refused to be broken. In the gallery, a Marine vet sat rigid. His jaw trembled once, but not from emotion. From memory. He didn't blink. The silence held. 1 second. Then 2. Then 5. Not empty. Just full of something no one wanted to move through too quickly. In that silence, the room stopped being a place of questions. It became a room of knowing. Arnold let the pause finish itself. Then, gently, almost mechanically, he closed the folder in front of him. Not slammed. Not theatrical. Just closed. The sound, soft as it was, broke the spell. But only slightly. Patel adjusted his microphone. But he didn't use it. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Not because he lacked a response. Because any response would have sounded like a defense. The camera didn't return to Arnold. It stayed. On the wall. On the flag. On the document meant to guide the room, face down. A visual truth. Quiet. Undeniable. And somewhere, in the upper gallery, someone whispered just loud enough for the boom MIC to catch. He didn't raise his voice, but everything fell. No one asked for clarification. No one asked for more. The room had already heard what it needed. And it wasn't the sentence that stayed. It was the breath after. The hearing was still technically in session. But no one knew what to say. The chair fumbled with a page of closing notes. Read none of them. The microphone light stayed on, forgotten. Kash Patel didn't move. Arnold stood. No hand pressed the table. No gesture asked for attention. He simply stood. And that was the new gravity in the room. No movement was needed to command it anymore. He reached for the folder. Closed since the last statement. Lifted it without effort. The pen remained on the desk. Left behind. That, too, said something. He turned. Half the room expected a nod. A glance. But Arnold didn't offer a single acknowledgement. Not from distance. Not for camera. Not for comfort. He passed the second row, where aides were still holding legal pads, but no one was writing now. Not even pretending. The microphone hadn't been switched off. So it caught the faint creak of his boots across the linoleum. He passed the gallery without a word. A young journalist near the railing turned to her cameraman. Did we just watch something get taken down? The cameraman didn't answer. Just kept filming.
No zoom. No tilt.
Just steady. A few more steps, and Arnold reached the rear doors. He paused. Not for reflection. Not for applause. But because someone had stepped slightly into his path. A congressional intern. Early 20s. Clipboard in hand. Shirt half untucked from the rush of the day. She didn't speak. Just looked at him. Then down, just slightly. Not out of deference. Out of something older. Recognition. Maybe. He gave a nod. Barely emotion. Enough to register, but not enough to comfort. Then walked past. The doors didn't swing wide. They opened slow, controlled. Behind him, Patel finally moved, just a shift. Enough to reach for his water again. But not to drink. He placed the glass further from him. As if distance would clarify something. Inside the control booth, a technician leaned toward his producer. We're going to have to rerun that. Live delays already clipped. The producer didn't reply. He was watching the screen that caught it all. Not Arnold. Not Patel. But a single wide shot of the room. The chairs. The flags. The misplaced Constitution still lying spine up. And the pen. Still there. One reporter, walking out with her recorder off, whispered to herself, they'll fact-check the words. But they won't fact-check the silence. Outside, on the Capitol steps, Arnold didn't speak to press. Didn't wait for cameras. Didn't wave. He walked past a bank of microphones arranged for a soundbite he had no intention of delivering. And as he reached the last stair, the same intern from inside, now standing at the railing above, turned to someone beside her. Was that scripted? A pause. The staffer next to her, older, tired eyes, quietly answered, no. That was real. Cut to black. Not with music. Not with credits. Just the sound of a gavel being placed, not struck, on the wood. And the room, still watching itself.